Hello and welcome back to another audiobook reading. The second story that we will be reading today is called Beauty and the Beast. Beauty and the Beast, retold by Hamilton Wright Mabie, illustrated by Colleen Browning. There was once a rich merchant who had 6 children, 3 boys and 3 girls. As he was himself a man of great sense, he spared no expense for their education, and he provided them with every luxury. The 3 daughters were all handsome girls, particularly the youngest. Indeed, she was so very beautiful that every one called her Beauty, which made her sisters very jealous of her. This youngest daughter was not only more handsome than her sisters, she was also better tempered. The 2 eldest were vain of being rich, and they spoke with pride to those they thought below them. They gave themselves 1,000 airs and would not visit other merchants' daughters. Nor would they, indeed, be seen with any but persons of quality. They went every day to balls, plays, and public walks, and always made fun of their youngest sister for spending her time in reading, sewing, and playing the harpsichord. As it was well known that these young ladies would have large fortunes, many great merchants wished to marry them. The 2 eldest always answered that, for their parts, they had no thoughts of marrying anyone below a duke, or an earl at least. Beauty had quite as many offers to her as her sisters, but she always answered with the greatest civility that she was much obliged to her suitors, but she would rather live some years longer with her father, as she thought herself too young to marry. It happened that by some unlucky accident, the merchant suddenly lost all of his fortune, and had nothing left but a small cottage in the country. Upon learning of this, he said to his daughters, with tears running down his cheeks, "My children, we must now go and dwell in the cottage, and try to earn a living by our labor, for we have no other means of support." The 2 eldest replied that they did not know how to work, and would not leave town. They said that they had suitors enough who would be glad to marry them, even though they no longer had any fortune. But in this they were mistaken. When the suitors heard what had happened, they said, "The girls were so proud and ill-tempered that all we wanted was their fortune. We are not sorry at all to see their pride brought down. Let them give themselves heirs to their cows and sheep." Everybody pitied poor Beauty, however, because she was so sweet-tempered and kind to all who knew her. Several gentlemen offered to marry her, though she had not a penny. Still, Beauty refused, saying that she could not think of leaving her poor father in this trouble, and would go with him to help him in his labors in the country. At first Beauty cried, in secret, for the hardships she was now obliged to suffer. But in a very short time she said to herself, "Oh, the crying in the world will do me no good, so I will try to be happy without a fortune." When they had moved to their cottage, the merchant and his 3 sons employed themselves in plowing and sowing the fields and working in the garden. Beauty also did her part. She got up by 4 o'clock every morning, lighted the fires, cleaned the house, and got the breakfast for the whole family. Although at first she found all this very hard, she soon grew quite used to it. Indeed, the work greatly improved her health. When she had finished her housework, she used to amuse herself with reading, playing her music, or singing while she spun. But her 2 sisters were at a loss to know how to pass the time away. They had their breakfast in bed and did not rise till 10 o'clock. Then they usually went for a walk, but finding themselves very soon tired, they would sit down under a shady tree and grieve for the loss of their carriage and fine clothes. Often they would say to each other, What a mean-spirited, poor, stupid creature our young sister is, to be so content with our humble way of life." But their father did not feel this way at all. He admired the patience of his youngest daughter, for her sisters not only left her to do all the work of the house, but made fun of her constantly. After they had lived in this manner about a year, the merchant received a letter which informed him that one of his richest ships, which he had thought was lost, had just come into port. This news made the two eldest sisters almost mad with joy, for they thought they should now leave the cottage and have all their finery again. When they found out that their father must take a journey to the ship, the two eldest begged him to bring them back some new gowns, caps, rings, and all sorts of trinkets. But Beauty asked for nothing. She thought to herself that all the ship was worth would hardly buy everything her sisters wished for. "Beauty," said the merchant, "how is it that you ask for nothing? What can I bring you, my child?" "Since you are so kind as to think of me, dear father," she answered, "I should be glad if you would bring me a rose, for we have none in our garden." Now Beauty did not especially wish for a rose. She only said this in order not to anger her sisters, who would have said that she only wanted her father to praise her for not asking him for anything. The merchant took his leave of them and set out on his journey. When he got to the ship, some persons went to law with him about the cargo, and after a deal of trouble, he turned towards home as poor as he had gone away. When he was within 30 miles of his cottage, and thinking of the joy he should have in again meeting his children, he found that his road lay through a thick forest. It was bitterly cold and had begun to snow, and the wind was so high that he was twice thrown from his horse. Night came on, and he thought that he would surely die of cold and hunger, or be torn to pieces by the wolves that he heard howling around him. At all once he saw a long avenue of trees, with a light shining at the end of it, a great way off. As he approached the light, he found that it came from a fine palace, ablaze with candles. He walked faster and soon reached the gates. On opening these, he was very much surprised not to see a living creature in any of the yards. His horse, which had followed him, found a stable with the door open and went into it at once. Here the poor beast, being nearly starved, helped himself to a good meal of oats and hay. His master then tied him up and walked towards the house, which he entered, but still without seeing anybody. He went on to a large hall, where he found a good fire and a table covered with handsome gold serving dishes, but only one plate, knife, and fork. As the snow had wetted him to the skin, the merchant went up to the fire to dry himself. "I hope," said he, "the master of this house or his servants will excuse me for entering unasked. Surely it will not be long now before I see them." He waited a good time, but still nobody came. At last the clock struck 11. Now being quite faint for the want of food, he helped himself to a chicken and a few glasses of wine. Yet all the time he was trembling with fear. He sat alone thus till the clock struck 12. Finally he took courage and began to look a little more about him. Opening a door at the end of the hall, he went through it into a very grand room in which there was a fine bed. As he was quite weak and tired, he shut the door, took off his clothes, got into bed, and straightway fell asleep. It was 10 o'clock in the morning before he awoke. What was his amazement to see a handsome new suit of clothes laid ready for him, instead of his own ruined garments. "To be sure," said he to himself, "this place belongs to some good fairy, who has taken pity on my ill luck." He looked out of the window and saw, instead of snow, the most charming arbors covered with all kinds of flowers. He returned to the hall, where he had supped, and found a breakfast table with rolls and a pot of hot chocolate waiting for him. "Indeed, my good fairy," said the merchant aloud, "I am vastly obliged to you for your kind care of me." He then made a hearty breakfast, took his hat, and started off to the stable to pay his horse a visit. As he passed under one of the arbors, which was loaded with roses, he thought of what Beauty had asked him to bring back to her. So he began to pick a few roses to carry home. At the same moment, he heard a most shocking noise, and looking up, beheld such a frightful beast coming towards him that he was ready to drop with fear. "Ungrateful man!" cried the beast, in a terrible voice. "I have saved your life by letting you into my palace, and in return you steal my roses, which I value more than anything else that belongs to me. You shall pay for your crime with your life." The merchant fell on his knees to the beast, and, clasping his hands, said, "My lord, I humbly beg your pardon. I did not think it would offend you to gather a rose for one of my daughters who wished to have one." "I am not a lord, but a beast," replied the monster. "I do not like false compliments. Do not fancy that you can coax me by calling me my lord. You tell me that you have daughters. Now I will pardon you if you, one of them, will agree to come and die instead of you. Go. If your daughters should refuse, promise me that you yourself will return in 3 months." The tender-hearted merchant had no thought of letting any one of his daughters die in his stead, but he knew that if he appeared to accept the beast's terms, he should at least have the pleasure of seeing his children once again. So he gave the beast his promise, and the beast told him he might then set off as soon as he liked. "But," said the monster, "I do not wish you to go back empty-handed. Go to the room you slept in, and you will find a chest there. Fill it with whatever you want, and I will have it transported to your own house for you." And when the beast had said this, he went away. The good merchant said to himself, "If I must die, yet I shall now have the comfort of leaving my children some riches." He returned to the room he had slept in, and found a great many pieces of gold. He filled the chest with them to the very brim and locked it. Then mounting his horse, he left the palace with a sore heart. The horse took a path across the forest of his own accord, and in a few hours they reached the merchant's house. His children came running around him as he got off the horse, but the merchant, instead of kissing them with joy, could not help crying as he looked at them. He held in his hand the roses, which he gave to Beauty, saying, "Take these roses, Beauty. Little do you know how dear they have cost your poor father." Then he gave them an account of all that he had seen or heard in the palace of the beast. The 2 eldest sisters began at once to shed tears, and to say that Beauty would be the cause of her father's death. "See," said they, "what happens from the pride of the little wretch. Why did not she ask for the sort of things that we did? But, to be sure, Beauty must not be like other people, and though she will be the cause of her father's death, she does not shed a tear." "It would be of no use," replied Beauty, "to weep for the death of my father, for he shall not die. Since the beast will accept one of his daughters, I will give myself up. I shall be only too happy to prove my love for the beast, for the best of fathers." "No, sister," cried the 3 brothers, "you shall not die. We will go in search of this monster, and either he or we must perish." "Do not hope to kill him," said the merchant, "for his magic is far too great for you to be able to do any such thing. I am touched by the resolution of Beauty, but I will not suffer her life to be lost. I myself am old, and cannot expect to live much longer. I shall give up but a few years of my life, and shall only grieve for the sake of my children." "Never, father," cried Beauty. "Never shall you go to that palace without me, for you cannot prevent my going after you. Though I am young, I am not afraid. Better for me to be eaten by the monster than to die of the grief your loss would cause me." The merchant tried in vain to reason with Beauty. She was determined to go. The merchant was so grieved at the thought of losing his child that he never once remembered the chest filled with gold. But that night, to his great surprise, he found it standing by his bedside. He said nothing about his riches to his eldest daughters, for he knew very well it would at once make them want to return to town. But he told Beauty his secret. She then told him that while he was away, 2 gentlemen who had been on a visit to their cottage had fallen in love with her 2 sisters. She begged her father to use the gold as a dowry, so that her sisters might marry their suitors without delay. For Beauty loved her sisters in spite of the fact that they had used her so ill, and she forgave them with all her heart. When the 3 months were past, the merchant and Beauty got ready to set out for the palace of the beast. Upon this, the 2 sisters rubbed their eyes with an onion to make believe they shed a great many tears, but both the merchant and his sons cried in earnest. Only Beauty did not weep, for she thought that this would only make matters worse. They reached the palace in a very few hours, and the horse, without guidance, went into the same stable as before. The merchant and Beauty walked towards the large hall. Here they found a table covered with every dainty, and with 2 plates laid ready. The merchant had very little appetite, but Beauty, that she might the better hide her grief, placed herself at the table, and served her father's plate. She then began to eat herself, thinking all the time that perhaps the beast had a mind to fatten her before he ate her up, since he had provided such good cheer for her. When they had finished their supper, they heard a great noise. The good old man began to bid his poor child farewell, for he recognized the voice of the beast. When Beauty first saw the monster's frightful form, she could not help being afraid, but she tried to hide her fear as well as she could. The beast asked her if she had come entirely of her own accord, and though she was quivering with terror, she managed to say, "Yes." "You are a good girl, and I am very much obliged to you," he replied, then turned towards her father and said to him, "Good man, you may leave the palace tomorrow morning, and take care never to come back to it again. Good night, Beauty." "Good night, beast," she said, and the monster went out of the room. "Ah, my dear child," said the merchant, kissing his daughter, "I am half dead already at the thought of leaving you with this dreadful beast. You had better go back and let me stay in your place." "No," said Beauty boldly, "I will never agree to that. You must go home tomorrow morning." Then they wished each other good night and went to bed, both of them thinking they should not be able to close their eyes. But as soon as they lay down, they fell into a deep sleep and did not wake till morning. Beauty dreamed that a lady came up to her and said, "I am very much pleased, Beauty, with the goodness you have shown in being willing to give your life to save that of your father. It shall not go without a reward." As soon as Beauty awoke, she told her father this dream. But though it gave him some comfort, he did not take leave of his darling child without shedding many tears. When the merchant was out of sight, Beauty sat down on the large hall and began to cry also. But as she had a great deal of courage, she soon resolved not to make her sad case still worse by sorrow, which she knew could not be of any use to her. She resolved to wait as cheerfully as she could till night, when she was sure the beast would come and eat her up. She walked about to take a view of all the palace, and the beauty of every part of it much charmed her. Imagine her surprise when she came to a door which was marked Beauty's Room. She opened it at once, and her eyes were dazzled by the grandeur of the chamber. What astonished her most of all were a large bookcase filled with books, a harpsichord, and cages of beautiful singing birds. "The beast makes sure that I shall not be at a loss to amuse myself," said she, and it occurred to her suddenly that this room would hardly have been prepared for her if she had only one day to live. So she began to hope that all would not turn out as badly as she and her father had feared. She opened the bookcase and found these verses written in letters of gold on the back of one of the books. "Beauteous lady, dry your tears. No cause is here for sighs or fears. Command whatever your fancy may, so that delight shall mark your sway." "Alas," she said, sighing, "there is nothing I so much desire as to see my poor father and to know what he is doing at this moment." As she said these words to herself, she happened to glance into a mirror that hung on the wall. And in the glass she saw her home, and her father riding up to the cottage. Although in a short time this picture disappeared from the glass, Beauty began to realize that the beast was very kind to her, and that she no longer need to be afraid of him. About the middle of the day, she found a table laid ready for her. A sweet concert of music played all the time she was eating her dinner. Although there was no one to be seen but at supper, as she was going to seat herself at table, she heard the voice of the beast, and she could not help trembling with fear. "Beauty," said he, "will you give me leave to see you sup?" "That is as you please," answered she, hiding her fright. "Not in the least," said the beast. "You alone command in this place. If you should not like my company, you need only say so, and I will leave you that moment. Tell me, Beauty, do you not think me very ugly?" "Why, yes," she said, "for I cannot tell a lie, but then I think you are very good." "You are right," replied the beast, "and besides being ugly, I am also very stupid. I know well enough that I am but a beast." "I should think you cannot be stupid," said Beauty, "if you know yourself so well." "Pray, do not let me hinder you from eating," said he, "and be sure you do not want for anything. All that you see is yours, and I shall be grieved if you are not happy." "You are very kind," said the Beauty. "I must needs own that when I think of your good nature, I almost forget how ugly you are." Yes, I hope I am good-tempered," said he, "but still I am a monster." "There are many men who are worse monsters than you," replied Beauty. "I am better pleased with you in that form, though it is ugly, than with those men who carry a wicked heart under a handsome exterior." "If I were clever," said the beast, "I would be able to thank you for what you have said, but how can a poor beast say anything that would give you pleasure?" Beauty ate her supper with a very good appetite, and almost lost her dread of the monster, but she was ready to sink with fright when he said to her, "Beauty, will you be my wife?" For a few minutes she was not able to speak a word, afraid of putting him in a rage by refusing. At length she said gently, "No, beast." The monster made no reply, but sighed deeply, and went away. When Beauty found herself alone, she began to feel pity for the poor creature. "Dear," said she, "what a sad thing it is that he should be so hideous, since he is so kind and good-tempered." Beauty lived 3 months in the palace, very happily. The Beast came to see her every night and talked with her while she supped. Although his conversation was neither witty nor clever, yet she saw in him every day some new mark of goodness. Instead of dreading his coming, she always looked at her watch to see if it was almost 9 o'clock, the time when he never failed to visit her. There was but one thing that vexed her. Every night before the Beast went away from her, he always made it a rule to ask her if she would be his wife, and seemed very much grieved at her saying no. At last, one night, she said to him, "You vex me greatly, Beast, by forcing me to refuse you so often. I wish I could take such a liking to you that I could agree to marry you, but I must tell you plainly that I do not think it will ever happen. I shall always be your friend, so try to be content with that." "I must needs do so then," said the Beast, "for I know well enough how frightful I am. But I love you better than myself, and I know that I am very lucky in your being pleased to stay with me. Now promise me, Beauty, that you will never leave me." Beauty was upset when he said this, for that every day she had seen in her glass that her father had fallen sick of grief for her sake and was very ill. "I would promise you with all my heart," said she, "never to leave you, but I long so much to see my father that, if you do not give me leave to visit him, I shall die of grief." "I would rather die myself, Beauty," answered the Beast, "than make you unhappy. I will send you to your father's cottage. You shall stay there, and your poor Beast shall die of sorrow." "No," said Beauty, crying, "I love you too well to be the cause of your death. I promise to return in a week. You have shown me in my mirror that my sisters are married, and my brothers are gone for soldiers, so that my father is left all alone. Let me stay a week with him." "You shall find yourself with him tomorrow morning," replied the Beast. "But mind, do not forget your promise. When you wish to return, you have only to put your ring on a table beside you when you go to bed. Goodbye, Beauty." The Beast sighed as he said these words, and Beauty went to bed very sorry to see him so much grieved. When she awoke in the morning, she found herself in her father's cottage. She rang a bell that was at her bedside, and a servant entered. As soon as she saw Beauty, the woman gave a loud shriek, upon which the merchant ran upstairs. When he beheld his daughter, he was ready to die of joy. He ran to the bedside and kissed her 100 times. At last, Beauty remembered that she had brought no clothes with her. Just then, the servant came to tell her she had found in the very next room a large chest full of dresses trimmed all over with gold and adorned with pearls and diamonds. Beauty, in her own mind, thanked the Beast for his kindness, and she put on the plainest gown she could find among them all. She then told the servant to put the rest away with a great deal of care, for she intended to give them to her sisters. No sooner had she spoken these words than the chest disappeared. Her father then suggested that perhaps the Beast chose for her to keep them all for herself. As he said this, they saw the chest standing again in the same place. While Beauty was dressing, a servant brought word to her that her sisters had come with their husbands to pay her a visit. The 2 sisters both lived unhappily with the gentleman they had married. The husband of the eldest was very handsome, but he was so proud of his looks that he thought of nothing else from morning till night, and had no time to admire the beauty of his wife. The second had married a man of great learning. He made use of his learning, however, only to torment and affront all his friends, his wife more than any of them. The 2 sisters were ready to burst with spite when they saw Beauty dressed like a princess, and looking so very charming. All the kindness that she showed them was of no avail. They were even more vexed when she told them how happily she lived at the palace of the Beast. The spiteful creatures went by themselves into the garden, where they cried to think of her good fortune. "Why should the little wretched be better off than we?" said one. "We are much handsomer than she is." "Sister," said the other, "a thought has just come into my head. Let us try to keep her here longer than the week that the Beast gave her leave to stay. He will be so angry that perhaps he will eat her up." "That is a clever plan," answered the first, "but to do this we must appear to be very kind to her." Then they made up their minds to this wicked plan, and went to join her in the cottage, whereupon they showed her so much false love that Beauty could not help crying for joy. When the week was ended, the two sisters began to pretend so much grief at the thought of her leaving them that she agreed to stay a week more. Nevertheless, Beauty could not help fretting for the sorrow that she knew her staying would give her poor Beast, for she tenderly loved him and much wished for his company again. The 10th night of her being at the cottage, she dreamed that she was in the garden of the palace. In her dream, the Beast lay dying on a plot of grass. With his last breath, he reminded her of her promise and laid his death to her having deserted him. Beauty awoke in a great fright and burst into tears. "Am not I wicked," she said, "to behave so ill to a Beast who has shown me so much kindness? Why will I not marry him? I am sure I should be more happy with him than my sisters are with their husbands. He shall not suffer any longer on my account. I will blame myself all the rest of my life." Then she rose, put her ring on the table, got into bed again, and soon fell asleep. In the morning she awoke with joy to find herself in the palace of the Beast. She dressed very beautifully in order to please him, and as she passed the hours waiting for night, she thought she had never known a day to pass away so slowly. At last the clock struck 9, but the Beast did not come. Beauty began to fear that, in truth, she had been the cause of his death. She ran from room to room all over the palace, calling his name, but he was nowhere to be found. After looking for him a long time, she remembered her dream and ran directly towards the garden. And there she found the poor Beast lying senseless on the grass plot. She threw herself down beside him, and finding that his heart still beat, she ran and fetched some water from a pond in the garden, and threw it on his face. The Beast opened his eyes and said, "You forgot your promise, Beauty. My grief for the loss of you has made me starve myself to death, but now I shall die content, for I have had the joy of seeing you once more." "No, dear Beast," cried Beauty, "you shall not die. You shall live to be my husband. Marry me, dearest Beast, and I shall be yours forever. I thought that what I felt for you was only friendship, but the pain in my heart now shows me that I cannot live without you." The moment Beauty had spoken these words, the palace was suddenly a blaze of lights. Music sounded, guns boomed, and fireworks shot into the sky. With a cry, Beauty turned to ask the Beast what was the cause of these things, when to her amazement she found beside her, not the Beast, but a startlingly handsome prince. "Where is my beloved Beast?" asked Beauty. "You see him at your feet, Beauty," answered the prince, "for I am he. A wicked fairy condemned me to keep the form of a beast until a beautiful young lady should agree to marry me, and she ordered me on a pain of death not to reveal my plight. You alone, dearest Beauty, have kindly judged of me by the goodness of my heart. In return I offer you my hand and my crown, though I know the reward is much less than you deserve." Beauty, most delightfully surprised, helped the prince to rise, and they walked along to the palace. Imagine her wonder on finding her father and sisters there, brought by the lady Beauty had seen in her dream. "Beauty," said the lady, who was a fairy, "receive the reward of the choice you have made. You have chosen goodness of heart rather than cleverness and beauty. Therefore you deserve to find them, all three, joined in the same person. You are going to be a great queen. I hope a crown will not change your disposition." "As for you, ladies," said the fairy to the other two sisters, I have long known the malice of your hearts, and the wrongs you have done. You shall become 2 statues. Under that form you shall still keep your reason, and shall stand at the gates of your sister's palace. I will not pass any worse sentence on you than for you to see her happy. You will appear in your own persons again, when you are fully cured of your faults." Then, amidst a gay celebration, Beauty and the Prince were married. They lived happily ever afterward, a king and queen who were as kind and good-tempered as they were handsome. The end. Thank you guys for listening to the audiobook of The Beauty and the Beast. Hope you have a great day. Goodbye.